Hey everyone, so I wanted to take a second to hop on here and do a video. We are at the 1 year anniversary that we lost Taylor, and so the video I did telling everyone about it, I guess, is a few days shy of being about a year old. And we've got some plans tonight. By we, I mean some immediate friend group, to get together and kind of honor him, have a dinner and all that. But I wanted to get on here and kind of address everyone, because the outpour initially, and even in the last 12 months when it happened, has been just awesome from the StillLine's fan base, and we haven't been a band for many years now. But I wanted to get on here today and take the time to actually tell a story. So this might be a little bit of a long-winded video, so if you're up for it, just bear with me on here. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of my experiences, and one in particular with working with Taylor over the years. And I'm going to do so by telling a story about a song and how it came to be, and how, where it came from. And if you're watching this video, you're probably a fan of StillLine, and if you are a fan of StillLine, then you're going to know the majority of our library, if not all of it, and I'm sure you know the Callout. It was by far our most successful song, still gets played pretty regularly on a lot of radio stations around the world to this day. And whether it was any of our favorites or even your favorite, it was definitely our most successful. So I'm going to take a second and talk about the Callout, because it's got a pretty funny story with Taylor, and goes back a really long way. So I'm going to do my best to recall this as I can. Literally, the origins of this song go back 14 or 15 years now, and but I want to talk about it because that song, being our biggest hit, would never have existed as it did if it weren't for Mike Fay and Taylor Patterson. Mike, who started the band with me and was with me the whole time, and Taylor, who would join us just a couple of years later when we relocated to St. Louis. And all started in, I think it was 2003 or 4, I don't remember exactly, but one of those, in that time frame, I wrote a song for a group that I was working in. We weren't called StillLine at the time, it was something else I was building, and I wanted to write something that had like this kind of Pink Floyd feel, and it ended up being this like 8-minute, maybe even like 9-minute long song that just had a verse and a chorus and then no real bridge. It just had this outro, and I called it the Callout. I'm going to show you a little bit of that right now. So if you're watching this, I'm assuming you know the Callout as it is, and the music video, and the one that gets played on the radio. So this, see if I can remember this right, actually is how the Callout started. This was the verse progression. And it went like that. So nothing like, and the melody was totally different. And the chorus did this. So that was the verse and the chorus of the song. And I'll be completely honest, I don't entirely remember the melodies and what I actually wrote then. What I do remember is the outro of the song, which was, out of those 8 or 9 minutes I was talking about, the outro I think was like 4 of it. And I had just done this. I came up with this little run where I was doing... with that, I was doing this. Call out all the names of sons and daughters that you knew. You find the proof that you have found your way. You have found your way. So, and it was over that progression. And what I remember when I met Mike a year or two after I started writing that song, was about 2005, when Mike and I met and started what would become StillLine. He'd heard a recording of that, and by that time I think I'd honestly nearly forgotten about the song entirely, and he didn't really latch on to the first half, but he just really liked that melody at the end there. And I remember him mentioning that a couple times, and I didn't really give it much thought, other thought than that. And we would go on to do the After the Fall EP, and then many years later we did the 42 album, and I just kind of forgot about the song entirely. And that brings us to about 2010, I think it was like right after we wrapped and released the 42 album, that we're down working on some songs for We Were All Asleep. And what a lot of people may not know is we were recording the We Were All Asleep album. We started it before 42 even came out. So, like, because we had that much material, because it took us 4.5 years between that EP and the 42 album. So we developed that much material. So it was either do a double album or just record 2 albums and release them, you know, a year or 2 apart, which is what we ended up doing. But we're working on the We're All Asleep album, and we had almost the entire thing tracked, and almost every song written and recorded. And then Mike came to me one day, and he was doing this. And I was like, that's got a cool feel to it. And he says, yeah, you remember that melody that you did for that old song of yours, the Callout? And vaguely, and he kind of, you know, I think he might have hummed it or something and refreshed my memory a little bit. So it went from that I did to Mike changing the key completely, and by that time I'd forgotten the old one, so it wasn't hard to adjust, and just become that, call out all the names of sons and daughters that you know, and turned into that note. So we just kind of messed with that for a day or two, and it was like, oh, this has got a cool feel to it. But we really know what else to do with it. And at this point in time, Mike didn't live in St. Louis where the rest of us did. He was driving back and forth from Bloomington, and he did that for years. If you want to know the story of Mike's commitment to making StillLine work while we did it for nearly a decade, for at least 3, maybe even 4 years, he was driving a 6-hour round trip every Sunday of the week to come out and practice with us. Anyway, the point of that is that we were working on that part, and then that was all we had. So Taylor actually asked me, because he was really into it, he said, hey, you should come over like Wednesday or something, I don't remember what day it was, and we'll talk about that song and see if we can maybe get something ready for the guys to all show up next Sunday. Like, sure, I can do that. So I remember I went over to Taylor's, and he was really pumped, and he just thought it had this cool feel, and he'd done this, that driving drum beat that you guys have all heard a million times if you've listened to the song. And he says to me, he goes, we got to get to the chorus, man. He says, and what I think it needs to do, and I'll never forget this. This is the part of the story I remember very vividly. I'm probably mixing up some details prior, but he says, I think the chorus should just be like stabbing. And I'm like, stabbing? What do you mean stabbing? And he says, just like, because he goes, that verse just has that smooth drive and just that like kind of muted tone and like that. So we need to just come into the chorus and just hit them, just stab it. So, you know, the verse has that progression that so I'm thinking, okay, well, let me see what I can do. Sorry, someone's trying to text me there. Let me see what I can do. I don't really know what you mean by stabbing. He goes, just think of like, just hit. So the only thing I could think of, I just jumped up to a C chord, if you know your guitar stuff, and just did that. And he immediately was like, yes, that's it. We need to stab him with that. Where do we go after that? And I was like, I said to him, I said, well, why don't we just climb it? And he gets really excited. Taylor used to get really pumped in these moments. And he's like, that's it. And he goes, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're gonna hit it right now. I'm going to count us in, and you just sing it. And I'm like, sing what, man? This is a brand new thing. I don't know what to do. He says, just sing it. Do what you do. I improv a lot of melodies and then figure it out later. So he's like, just sing it. So what I remember distinctly about that is I'm like, okay. And I turn around the microphone, and he immediately does the 4-count stick click. And I took what he said, I guess, very literally, and literally did the sing it, bring it loud, and I sang exactly what he said. I said sing it, and that became the chorus of the song, and we ended up landing on that with the big outro and the days, sweet days line. And I remember him calling me out. He goes, that sounds cool, but you can't say this days, sweet days. That's you know, improper English, man. I told him, I said, no, I'm actually saying daze as in D-A-Z-E, like you're in a daze. And then he was like, that's freaking brilliant. I'm pretty sure Taylor didn't use freaking, but we'll keep this video clean. So that became it, just the that was those stabby notes. And Taylor and I sat there, and I wasn't even on a distorted guitar. I was literally playing not this acoustic, but another acoustic of mine at the time. And we sat there and we put together that chorus based on the riff that Mike rearranged and remembered for almost, I guess it was about a 7-year gap. Well, since when I met Mike and he heard about a 5-year gap. So Mike held on to that memory of that melody for 5 years. And then Taylor and I sat down one day, just the two of us, and did that. And the rest is history. That pretty much became the song. The guys showed up 4 or 5 days later, whatever. I think it was a Wednesday we got together. So the following Sunday, and Taylor and I showed them what we got, and they all were just like, "Yeah, that obviously works." And we composed it, took it to the studio, and it became that classic. The very last song you record for the album is the initial single. We felt that way. Our producer Eric felt that way, and it came together. And I just wanted to share the story with everybody because the passion, the excitement that Taylor used to get in those moments was just, it was inspiring. You couldn't help. You felt like a little kid. You just this big grin on his face. Anyone who knows him personally knows exactly what I'm talking about. And yeah, basically he wrote the lyrics, whether he meant to or not, just by telling me to sing it to the beginning of the chorus of that song, and Mike kept it alive. So if it wasn't for those two guys, we wouldn't have what was our biggest hit by far. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with everybody. I thought that was kind of a cool thing to recall, and one of my favorite musical stories to share about working with Taylor and just how passionate he was. And on this day, 12 months removed from losing him, I really wanted to tell everybody something like this. And just, it was hard. I haven't even watched the video I did a couple days after he passed. I still haven't been able to bring myself to do it. So I wanted to share this one and just maybe, put a smile on everybody's face and think about him in the 1-year mark of his death. So thank you guys so much for continuing to listen and think about us and the music and everything. And what we did in that time frame is just so valuable to us, and it's because of the passion that you guys still have all these years later. So we love you, Taylor. We love you like a brother and miss you like crazy. And everyone out there, we love you too. So thanks for watching. Have a good one.